Hello, fellow Edmontonians. My name is Chloe, and this video will provide an overview of navigating Edmonton zoning bylaw using our new online platform. I'd like to begin by acknowledging and thanking the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries. This acknowledgement is significant because city planning and zoning are really about land and what happens on it. Land is used for many things and is tied to the practice of culture. The city hopes the new zoning bylaw will address and reconcile regulations that may create inequities for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Edmonton and Treaty 6. Zoning Bylaw 20,001, Edmonton's new zoning bylaw, came into effect on January 1st, 2024. You can access the bylaw directly using our new online platform at zoningbylaw.edmonton.ca, which was designed to make the bylaw more user-friendly and accessible. You can also use the updated zoning map at maps.edmonton.ca to get more familiar with the zones and associated regulations that apply to a property. First, we'll explain a few key zoning terms. Then we'll go over the contents of the bylaw and show you the basic structure of the standard zones. Before we explore the bylaw, we wanted to highlight a few key zoning terms that you'll hear us mention throughout the video. A zone contains rules for a specific property or area. It establishes where buildings can go, what types of buildings they can be, and allowable uses, which guide what activities are allowed on a property. Zones establish the basic rules for land use in the city. Every parcel of land in Edmonton has a zone. Each zone in the current zoning bylaw has a list of uses that are either permitted with specific regulations, or discretionary. You can think of permitted uses as being allowed as of right. As of right means that if the proposed development meets all the regulations, the property owner has the right to develop and the city must approve the permit application. Some permitted uses have specific regulations associated with them, which must also be met. Discretionary uses may be allowed, but this is at the discretion of the development planner. Regulations are rules that apply to development. Each zone contains regulations. Now let's dive into it. This is the landing page for the zoning bylaw. As you can see, there's a new look and feel to our online platform. This new platform was developed to make it easier to access and navigate the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw contains tables and diagrams to clearly communicate regulations and their intended outcomes in a visual way. There are a number of direct links on the top right of the page. These links will take you to the previous zoning bylaw 12,800, the zoning map, and provide the option for users to create a PDF version of the current zoning bylaw 20,001. Scrolling down the landing page, you'll find an overview of how to use this bylaw. As you scroll, you'll see a handy back to top button in the right bottom corner. We also have a new search function in the top right. You can use this to look up zones, definitions, and more. It also contains a link to a record of amendments. The zoning bylaw is a living document and may be changed in the future. Any future amendments to the zoning bylaw will be listed here for reference. As amendments are made, they'll be identified throughout using an icon that uses the letter A. As you explore the bylaw, you may also notice an icon that uses the letter I in various spots. This is the information icon. If you click it, it will open a pop-up window that provides additional information related to the regulation. For example, in section 2.250, the flood protection overlay, the information icon directs you to maps.edmonton.ca, where you can find a more detailed version of the flood protection overlay map. Navigating to the left side of the page, you'll find the table of contents. As you can see, the bylaw is divided into 8 parts. We'll start off with part 1, Contents and zoning map. You'll notice throughout the bylaw that some text is blue and underlined. This indicates that this is a formally defined term in the zoning bylaw. Both use definitions and general definitions appear in this way. If you click on them, a pop-up window will appear with the definition. Next, let's find the zoning map. Section 1.20 sets out that the zoning map is on maps.edmonton.ca. You can use the map to find out your property's zone before referring to that zone in the bylaw to find out what regulations apply. We're currently developing a new interactive zoning map that will be released later in 2024. Part 2 contains the standard zones and overlays. These are organized into 6 main land use categories: residential, mixed use, commercial, industrial, open space and urban services, and agricultural. To find a specific zone, you can use the drop-down function in the table of contents. For example, if you are looking to find the neighborhood mixed-use zone, you would click on the plus sign located next to the mixed uses zone, and it would provide all the zones that fall under that category. An overlay is an additional layer of development regulations that apply to specific areas and supersede or add to the development regulations of the underlying zone. Overlays are used to achieve local planning objectives such as protecting the environment or reducing risk, and are identified on the zoning map. One example is the flood protection overlay. Part 3 contains the special area zones. Special area zones are unique zones that are only applied in specific areas to regulate the activities, design, and intensity of development. They are used to achieve planning objectives that cannot be achieved through a standard zone, such as in the river valley. For example, there are 6 river valley special area zones to recognize unique pockets within the river valley that offer distinct recreation activities and environmental protection, such as Fort Edmonton Park and the Edmonton Valley Zoo. Part 4 is where you can find direct control zones. Direct control zones are unique zones that are typically used when a proposed development doesn't fit within a standard zone due to the uniqueness of a proposal, or in other special cases, such as when a property or structure is designated as having heritage significance. They allow for customized and tailored regulations to be applied to a specific area and must be approved by City Council through the rezoning process. Moving forward, we have removed the distinction between DC1 and DC2 zones. You'll see that we have reserved a section in the bylaw for any new direct control zones that may be approved in the future. We're currently working on migrating approximately 1,200 existing direct control zones into the new online platform. For now, when you click on the DC1 or DC2s using the drop-down menu, you'll be redirected to the platform we formerly used to access zoning bylaw 12800. Part 5 is where you can find the general development regulations. These include rules for common features of new development, such as landscaping, parking, and site access, amenity areas for residential development, fences, etc. General development regulations are additional regulations that may apply to a proposed development, but are contained outside of the standard zone itself. This is because how and when these regulations are applied will vary based on the nature of the development. This part of the bylaw will be consulted and reviewed for every development proposal to ensure it complies with all relevant regulations. To gain a full understanding of what regulations apply to a proposed development, it's crucial to refer to Part 5. Next, we have Part 6, Specific Development Regulations. These regulations apply to only certain uses, living arrangements, or features of a building. They're intended to mitigate any potential land use impacts that may be associated with the use. Section 6.30, for example, contains rules that apply only to cannabis retail stores. A development may be subject to one or more specific development regulations. This is another section that is important to review to understand all the regulations that may apply to a proposed development. The administrative and interpretive regulations in Part 7 detail how to use the bylaw. It provides important information on how the bylaw works and how various tools may be used, including special area zones, direct control zones, and overlays. This section also contains rules for interpretation, which guide development planners, applicants, and residents alike in understanding how a regulation is intended to be interpreted. Section 7 also contains regulations which guide various land development processes, including development permits, rezonings, and subdivisions. This includes setting clear expectations for processing timelines, criteria for reviewing variances, how regulations will be enforced, and when notification to surrounding residents is required. Last but not least, the bylaw contains the definition sections. This part of the bylaw is split into two sections: use definitions, which define the various uses in the zoning bylaw, and general definitions, which define other terms. Definitions for terms that are capitalized in the zoning bylaw can be found in one of these two sections. As you can see, use definitions are grouped according to categories. The use categories in zoning bylaw 20,001 are intentionally broad to allow for a greater range of activities to occur in a particular building or space. This approach intends to future-proof the bylaw so that it's more adaptable to new and emerging business models without requiring a rezoning or change of use permit. You can search for the use definition that best fits the activity you're planning for as part of your new development. The development planner is ultimately responsible for determining which use category would apply. When in doubt, we recommend applications work with their development planner to find the best fit. Meanwhile, general definitions are listed alphabetically. If a word used in the zoning bylaw is not listed in this section, it should be interpreted to have its plain and ordinary meaning as the context requires. So now that we've gone through the different components of the bylaw, we'll take a look at a zone to see how everything works together. Let's go back up to the neighborhood mixed-use zone. Each zone begins with a purpose statement. This purpose statement communicates the overall intent and vision for the zone. It may be used to assist the applicant and the development planner in interpreting regulations and making decisions. Next, each standard zone contains a list of available uses. Most standard zones will only have a list of permitted uses. A few zones, such as the River Valley zones, provide a list of permitted and discretionary uses. Discretionary uses ensure that the development planner considers the compatibility of the proposed development with any surrounding development and consults any applicable city plans or policies while making their decision. Each standard zone has a section that contains additional regulations for specific uses. As mentioned earlier, depending on the nature of the proposed development, you may be required to cross-reference Part 6 of the zoning bylaw, specific development regulations. Following the regulations for uses, you can find site and building regulations. This subsection contains all the basic development regulations for the zone, such as height, floor area, and setback regulations. Please note, if there's any discrepancy, though we don't expect any, between the diagram and the wording of the regulation, the wording takes precedence. Next, some zones have a subsection called Design Regulations, which provides some general design parameters for developments. Building regulations are not intended to indicate the specific architectural design of a development, but are intended to enhance the appearance, avoid blank walls, and address the perception of a building from the street or the property next door. Finally, each standard zone contains general regulations. These contain all other rules that would apply to the developments in the zone, such as parking, landscaping, or waste management. Again, this is an important section to reference. The last thing we'll go over is how to reference the regulations. The word section is used to refer to the overall zone or general topic within the bylaw. The sections are listed in the table of contents. For example, section 6.60, home-based business section, which is under part 6 of the bylaw. The word subsection is used to reference a specific regulation or set of regulations within a section of the bylaw. The bottom example is a reference to a specific regulation. When it's written out, you can refer to a specific regulation as subsection 2.70.4.2.2.2 or subsection 4.2.2.2 of section 2.70. That concludes our video on navigating the new zoning bylaw. This video is just one of many resources created to help Edmontonians learn more about the new zoning bylaw and what it means for them. For more information and to access all resources, please visit edmonton.ca/zoning bylaw. Thank you.